The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair reserves the right to declare the committee in recess at any point. Before we begin, I would like to remind those in the audience that this hearing is open to the public, but actions that disrupt or distract from the proceedings will not be tolerated. The chair reserves the right to remove disruptive persons from the hearing. U.S. Capitol Police are on hand to assist with that task, and I thank them for their service and attendance. Today we continue our posture hearings with Centcom and Africom. As this will be both General Kurilla's and General Langley's final appearance before this committee, I want to thank you for your service to our nation. Both of you have been exemplary in your roles, and I want you to know you're appreciated. American deterrence in the Middle East and Africa eroded under the last administration. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan emboldened our adversaries. The Biden administration's appeasement of Iran only made matters worse. After Hamas's barbaric onslaught, Iran opened a second front, activating the Houthis to strike Israel and disrupt global trade. Since 2023, the Houthis have launched hundreds of attacks on U.S. warships and commercial vessels. Yet instead of holding the Houthis accountable, the Biden administration pulled them off the terror list. Immediately upon taking office, President Trump set out to restore peace through strength. He reinstated the maximum pressure campaign on Iran and strengthened America's hand in nuclear talks. I strongly support his demand for Iran to permanently give up its capacity to enrich uranium. Iran's nuclear program must be dismantled for good, but so must its proxy network. Israel has taken decisive action against Hamas, Lebanese, Hezbollah, and other rogue actors that had been operating in Assad's Syria. Thanks to Israel, that what once seemed impossible is becoming a reality. Iran's proxies are being destroyed. The Trump administration is building on this momentum. Nowhere is this clearer than in its response to the Houthis. Under President Trump, the United States has hit back decisively, but that threat is not gone. Recent reports indicate Iran is buying materials from China for hundreds of ballistic missiles. It is clear that Iran is determined to rearm and resupply its proxies. So we must be equally determined to stop them. This administration is right to prioritize Homeland Security, but that mission begins well beyond our borders. We must stop terrorists abroad before they reach us. That means denying terrorists a safe haven, and for this, U.S. forces must be forward deployed. That's why I support the Department's condition-based approach to rebalancing U.S. forces in Syria. We cannot allow Syria to become a sanctuary again for terrorists, Iran or Russia. The same applies for Africa. Al-Shabaab, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda are all gaining ground on that continent. Recent U.S. strikes in Somalia and across Africa have disrupted their operations, but that pressure must continue. Yet Africom is consistently under-resourced. Even modest increases in ISR and security cooperation funding would go a long way and empower our African partners to take on more of the burden in the fight against terrorism. We also must confront China's growing footprint on Africa. The reality is that the threat China poses to the United States extends well beyond the Indo-Pacific. In Africa, Beijing is securing critical minerals and building military infrastructure from Djibouti to West Africa. If China secures a permanent naval base on Africa's Atlantic coast, it will threaten vital sea lanes and have serious consequences for our ability to defend our homeland. Russia is also deepening its presence across Africa. It is trading arms and mercenaries for access to Africa's gold, oil, and other resources. The resulting revenue is helping fund Putin's malign activities worldwide. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we can continue to defend forward in Centcom and Africom and ensure the region's threats never reach the U.S. homeland. And with that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I want to join you in our thank yous to our two military witnesses today. They have served incredibly well for a long time, and sorry, we'll not be seeing before you this committee. I don't know if you share, if you will miss us as much as we miss you. But we do appreciate your service. It's good to have you back one more time. And the degree of expertise that you bring to these two very difficult regions is enormously helpful to our committee, but also to our country. And I will agree with the chairman. I think the region is unbelievably unstable, both in Centcom and in Africa. Chairman has a slightly more optimistic take on how things have gone the last 6 months than I do. I think the instability is still raging and it's still something we need to deal with. Certainly the war in Gaza goes on. The suffering there is enormous. We need to get to a ceasefire as soon as possible. There continues to be conflicts in the West Bank. We see in Africa and West Africa in particular is a deeply concerning situation where terrorist offshoots are beginning to take over more and more territory and threaten more and more countries. Sudan, civil war continues to be a major destabilizing factor. A war no one really pays much attention to continues to go on between the DRC and Rwanda with catastrophic consequences. We have a lot of work to do in the region. Even in Yemen, yes, it's good that the Houthis for the moment have said that they're going to stop shooting at U.S. ships, but we still don't have commercial shipping traffic feeling free to go through the Red Sea. So we still have a lot of work to do to get after all of the instability in the region. I will agree with the chairman that Iran is the primary driving force in that without question. You see their hand everywhere: Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Israel, Iraq. Getting an ability to contain that is crucially important. And I actually think it is good that President Trump is negotiating directly with Iran. Now, my Republican colleagues would pretty much lose their damn minds every time Biden even suggested that he might talk to Iran. So that particular hypocrisy grates a little bit. But it is a good idea to try to have a conversation. I think it is also crucially important in the negotiations that we focus on their support for proxies. It is their support for proxies that is the most destabilizing force in the region. But we also need to work more closely with our Israeli partners. I have an enormous amount of sympathy for the threats that they face from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from Iran, and others, but we need to find an alternative to Hamas. We need to work with Palestinians to give us some sort of future beyond Hamas. Partners in the region, as you well know, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others are working with those Palestinian partners, trying to generate that and being rebuffed constantly by the Israeli government. This war won't stop until Hamas is gone. I agree with that. But Hamas won't be gone until there is some alternative for the Palestinian people. I think it is really important that we step up pressure to try to push those negotiations and show the Palestinian people that they do have a future. If they don't think they have a future, it's going to be very difficult to stop this conflict. In Africa, I am very concerned about where that is going. The terrorist groups, as I said, seem to be taking hold in a number of countries. Russia has become more and more prominent in the region. They don't seem to be doing a particularly good job of keeping the peace, but they are still very present and have relationships with a number of countries. The path forward to that is not clear to me. I will close with a note of agreement with the chairman. These regions matter. They lead to greater instability. And when we talk about our primary concern being China, we must understand that the challenge with China is global. Any notion that we're going to pivot to Asia and therefore deal with China and just ignore the rest of the world, I think fundamentally misunderstands what is happening. As you gentlemen know, China is very active in Africa. They're very active in the Middle East. Russia is as well. This is a global challenge. These two regions are crucially important. We need to be present, but we also need to work with partners in the region to try to create greater stability in what is a very challenging part of the world. With that, I look forward to the testimony and the questions and answers, and I yield back.
I'd now like to introduce our witnesses. First, we have Ms. Katherine Thompson. She's performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Affairs. General Eric Kurilla is the commander of United States Centcom, and General Michael Langley is the commander of United States Africa. Welcome to all of our witnesses. Ms. Thompson, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee, thank you for inviting me today to testify on our defense posture and policy in U.S. Central Command and U.S. Africa Command, respectively. It is my honor to appear alongside General Kurilla and General Langley. The Department of Defense is reviewing our posture, activities, and resources across all combatant commands, including Centcom and Africom, in line with President Trump's America First priorities to make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. In line with President Trump's Peace Through Strength framework and under Secretary Hegseth's leadership, DoD is putting core American interests first in the Centcom and Africom AORs to make America and our citizens more secure. America's core national security interests in the Centcom AOR are to 1, prevent and disrupt credible terrorist threats to the U.S. homeland, 2, deny Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and 3, support Israel's ability to defend itself. State and non-state actors across the Middle East, such as ISIS, Iran, and its proxies, continue to threaten the U.S. homeland, as well as our forces and posture across the region. At the direction of the President, the Department of Defense maintains the forces and capabilities to defend against these threats to our national security. President Trump has already demonstrated his unrelenting commitment to keep Americans safe by conducting operations targeting Houthi terrorists in Yemen that successfully restored freedom of navigation and American deterrence. We will continue to work with our regional partners to enable U.S. operations, coordinate on approaches to regional challenges, and expand interoperability to address our shared threats. For example, our Iraqi security force partners now shoulder the majority of operations against ISIS remnants, requiring only a modest U.S. advisory role. In addition, the historic package of $142 billion in defense sales to Saudi Arabia, which Secretary Hegseth signed last month in Riyadh, will help lock in another generation of interoperability and burden sharing with critical regional partners. We will also continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, a model ally for the region, as they defend against threats from every direction. Secretary Hegseth has backed up this commitment with action and has authorized the deployment of a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, missile battery and its associated U.S. military crew to Israel. In Africa, the most pressing security challenges include potential threats to the U.S. homeland emanating from terrorist activity, as well as China's ambitions to expand its military power projection capabilities via overseas basing, naval access, as well as an ambition to establish dominance over critical mineral resources on the continent that fund their defense supply chains. To address those security issues, DoD has 2 priorities in the Africom AOR. 1 is to disrupt, degrade, and deny the activities of Africa-based terrorist groups that have both the capability and intent to strike the U.S. homeland or U.S. personnel and facilities. To this end, U.S. forces stand ready to engage and neutralize terrorists through direct action. At the same time, the Department is working with African nations to grow their operational independence and empower them to counter shared threats. At the same time, DoD will work to prevent and counter efforts by China to position its own forces in the Africom AOR in ways that threaten our ability to defend the U.S. homeland and deter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. We will also work closely with interagency partners to counter Chinese efforts to exclude the United States from critical markets on the continent. DoD's largest force posture location in Africa is Camp Lemanoir in Djibouti, which hosts 3,300 DoD military personnel and civilians that support Africom, Centcom, U.S. Special Operations Command, and U.S. Transportation Command operations. This base, along with smaller enduring locations, provides support to contingency operations, episodic military-to-military engagements, and crisis response. To conclude, I want to emphasize the important role of Congress in enabling the Department of Defense to achieve our objectives in the Centcom and Africom areas of responsibility. Your support and funding have been and will continue to be critical to advancing peace through strength. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Department of Defense, and we appreciate your continued support to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and civilians who work every day to make the American people safer and more secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. General Kurilla, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm joined today by Command Master Chief Fleet Derek Walters, the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Central Command. Our partners have described the events of the last 20 months as a tectonic shift, an earthquake, one that began on 7 October 2023 and continued to produce aftershocks across the region. We have been at the brink of regional war several times. Conflict was triggered in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the Red Sea, and Yemen. The region held its breath as Iran and Israel traded blows in the first overt state-on-state attacks between these two countries in their history. At the same time, Tehran continued to increase their stockpiles of uranium enriched to 60%, for which there is no civilian purpose, threatening catastrophic ramifications across the region and beyond. Global violent extremists exploited the turmoil wherever possible to sustain their networks and regenerate capability. This included in post-Assad Syria and the porous border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We saw this threat actualized multiple times throughout 2024 in high-profile attacks overseas and attempted here at home. However, from this disorder emerges opportunity. Iran is in a weaker strategic position now than at any point in the past 40 years, though it maintains significant operational capability. Qasem Soleimani's vision of a Shia crescent from Iran through Iraq and Syria to Lebanon was shattered as the Syrian regime collapsed and Assad fled to Russia. Lebanese Hezbollah was decimated by Israel, including the death of many of their leaders who were implicated in the 1983 Beirut bombing that killed 241 American service members. This dealt a massive blow to Iran's terror network that has targeted and killed U.S. personnel across the region for decades. The Houthis, Iran's new premier proxy, threatened the free flow of commerce through a vital waterway and were met with a sustained, deliberate, and focused campaign to reestablish American freedom of navigation. Terrorists are under pressure as Centcom's relentless campaign against ISIS removed hundreds of fighters and leaders from the battlefields in Iraq and Syria, to include just 6 hours ago. Our network of partners dealt significant blows to the ISIS Khorasan networks, exploiting the tribal areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan, to include our Pakistani partners bringing the terrorists behind the Abbey Gate bombing to justice. Finally, the reality of aligning with Russia and China was laid bare as our partners across the region, as they watched Russia supporting Assad's atrocities against the Syrian people and the Chinese Communist Party cynically exploit Iran-backed violence in the Red Sea. The United States now stands in a strategic window of opportunity to secure its national interests in the central region, to protect the homeland, secure our economic prosperity, establish freedom of navigation, and prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. Centcom's deep military-to-military partnerships have proven a catalyst to these wide-ranging opportunities that now lay before us. Our relationships provide the foundation of the Middle East Air Defense Initiative that defeated hundreds of Iranian munitions and continues to set conditions for the rest of the region's defense. These relationships unleash our shared creative potential in what has become a sandbox of experimentation, enabling us to innovate together, develop rapid solutions to the entire joint force. Our partners are also on the front line. In Iraq and Syria, they remain crucial to the enduring defeat of ISIS, battling the group across their respective countries, as well as enabling the repatriation of ISIS detainees and displaced persons. The warfighters of U.S. Central Command, representing less than 2% of the entire joint force, have been at the forefront of these seismic events over the last year and often on the front lines of conflict. It was those warfighters who sprinted out of their bunkers to fuel, arm, and fly their F-15s through a barrage of missiles and UAVs. It was those warfighters who led the vanguard against maritime terror in the Red Sea, protecting the connective tissue of the global economy. And it was those warfighters who continue to pursue and eliminate the remnants of ISIS wherever they are to stop future attacks as far away from this homeland as possible. It is on their behalf, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Guardians who serve this nation on the front lines of freedom that I speak before you today. It is the honor of my professional life to serve as their commander. As I close over 37 years of uniformed service to this nation, I'd offer one final thought. I've spent most of my adult life living, fighting, leading, and building partnerships in the central region. We have traditionally viewed the region as a risk to our national interests, but as I depart, I would offer that there has rarely been a time with greater opportunity to protect those national interests than we have right now, but only if we have the courage to step through that window. Thank you, and I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Kurilla. General Langley, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished committee members, it's an honor to appear here today representing the outstanding service members, civilians, and families of the United States Africa Command. As I get closer to the end of my tenure of command, I remain in awe of the character and the capabilities of the men and women willing to serve our nation. Our team of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians, and civilians perform valiantly, and I'm honored and proud to serve with them. America remains in good hands. I'm proud to testify with my friend General Eric Kurilla, the commander of United States Central Command, and my colleague, Ms. Katherine Thompson from OSD Policy. I'd like to extend my gratitude for their steadfast cooperation. Now, ordinarily, I would be joined by my command senior enlisted leader, Sergeant Major Michael Woods. However, as all of our outstanding NCOs do, Sergeant Major Woods has chosen to put himself in the best position to influence operations. Today, he's in Morocco for the African Senior Enlisted Leaders Conference. Now, Morocco is a shining example of a great return on our investment. And their efforts in developing the enlisted corps across the continent is a crucial step in African military professionalism. I recently traveled to Morocco. I attended the African Lion 2025. This exercise is the largest exercise with participation of over 52 nations, 10 NATO allies, and 2 non-NATO allies, and over 10,000 soldiers participating. I also just returned from Kenya, where we jointly hosted the African Chiefs of Defense Conference in Nairobi. This gathering showcased the Kenyan Defense Force's commitment to fostering military dialogue and demonstrated their leadership. The insights drawn from that forum will help inform Africom's approach to hearing how our African partners are solving challenges in their own neighborhoods and understanding where they can shoulder more of the load. Now, everything we do at the United States Africom, especially these types of partnerships, has overarching goal in mind: achieving peace through strength. Now, this requires 3 things: a clear understanding of national security threats, a robust and dependable network of like-minded allies and partners, and appropriate resourcing to match military requirements. Now, as I've said in previous testimony, Africa remains a nexus theater from which the United States cannot afford to shift its gaze. It is home to terrorists who take advantage of conditions in Africa to grow and export their ideology. ISIS controls their global network from Somalia. It is where the Chinese Communist Party actively works to change the international rules-based order and establish regional hegemony. And it's where the Russian Federation seizes opportunities created by chaos and instability. Ladies and gentlemen, we must deter these nations and other malign actors from their goals on the continent. Many of our security and economic interests overlap with those of our African and European partners. Successful outcomes enabled by burden sharing are beneficial for all. As a posture-limited theater, we establish strength and work towards peace by enhancing security capabilities of our African partners through our robust system of alliances. Exercises, training events, security cooperation, and foreign military sales programs are the backbone of our military activities on the continent. Through these activities, our forces lead by example with a warrior ethos and stand by our partners and enhance trust in the United States military. United States Africom seeks to match capabilities with current and emerging threats to ensure that security of our forces while advancing American interests. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, crisis response forces, counter-unmanned aerial systems technology, and integrated air missile defense platforms are critical resources to accomplish our mission. I welcome your advocacy in ensuring that these necessary tools are in Africom's hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'd like to close by thanking the committee for your stalwart support during my tenure of command. Our ability to accomplish the mission is always linked to your advocacy and encouragement, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Langley. Chair now recognizes himself for questions. General Kurilla, Operation Rough Rider degraded Houthi capabilities and took a target off U.S. commercial ships. But they still keep hitting at Israel. What more can the U.S. do to support Israel against the Houthis and Iran's other terrorist proxies?
So I would tell you right now that the Iranian proxies are at one of the weakest levels they've been. They did decimation of the disintegration of the Hezbollah, Hamas. However, the Houthis, the biggest challenge with the Houthis is they are being provided with Iranian weapons. They provide the weapons and they assemble them inside of Yemen. There are experts from the IRGC that are inside of Yemen helping them to be able to manufacture these systems as well. So this is going to be a challenge going forward. We have got to stop the flow of the weapons into Yemen.
Thank you. President Trump's made it clear that if Iran doesn't permanently give up its nuclear enrichment, military force by the U.S. may be necessary. If the president directed, is CENTCOM prepared to respond with overwhelming force to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran?
I have provided the Secretary of Defense and the President a wide range of options.
I take that as a yes.
Yes.
General Langley, your command was created in 2007 to address the shortcomings of the division of Africa between CENTCOM, INDOPACOM, and EUCOM. Since then, Africa's strategic importance has only grown, with transnational terrorism on the rise, as well as China and Russia working to undermine our interest on the continent. Can you tell me, in your best military judgment, should Africom remain its own combatant command separate and apart from EUCOM?
Chairman, those statistics that you just stated is more of a reason why Africom needs to remain as a overall command to be able to address these challenges. Africa is a nexus theater for the great power competition, and then also with a number of violent extremist organizations that are encroaching upon the continent. It is a threat. It is a threat to our homeland, and it's a threat for our overall national security and protection of our national interests.
Yeah. I take that as a yes.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, and I fully agree with you. I made it very clear publicly that I will vigorously oppose any effort to consolidate Africom into EUCOM. As you heard in my opening statement, we need to be putting more resources in Africom to combat what China and Russia and Iran are doing, rather than looking at taking away attention and resources. General Kurilla, yesterday the ranking member and I introduced the SPEED Act. It's our effort by this committee to try to speed up acquisition of critical warfighting capabilities to strengthen our defense industrial base. What impact, if any, do you think this could have on our ability to help our partners in CENTCOM?
Thanks, Chairman. I have not read the full act, but I do know that it is trying to speed acquisition, change acquisition to get into the hands of the warfighter. Anything we can do to fix what I think is a very bureaucratic and slow process will help the warfighter.
Is there something else that you would suggest that we do to try
I think we need to start from scratch with a blank piece of paper on the FMS process. We've had dozens of task forces to look at FMS, and I have not seen much change. It is one of the #1 complaints that we get from our foreign partners, and we are 40% of the entire FMS projects in the region.
And if you had that blank sheet of paper and you were writing it out, tell me what you would do with it.
Well, I think there's 4 levers that control FMS. There's DOD. I think we have to fix some of our own processes internal on these requests.
Such as?
Well, I think sometimes we take months and up to a year when someone says, I'd like to sell you Patriots, and we go back and forth for a year. That should be days or weeks. It then goes to the State Department. Candidly, that is not where our holdup is. I think this body of Congress, there can be holds up for whatever reason that we hold. We don't want to sell a weapon system to a country. And candidly, the biggest problem we have right now is with industry, that they are not putting the investments in capital into their production lines. The biggest thing I think Congress can help with is multi-year funding that would be able, if you're a business and you say, I'm only going to get funded 1 year, they're not going to want to put the capital into those production lines. I thank you for what you've done with some of the 2-year funding, but I think it needs to be multi-year funding so that we can get these production lines up. And I think we got to look at our partners that are offering to also produce inside the region. Sorry for the long response.
Well, I think that last point especially would be very helpful, and I think I speak for this committee when I say we're open to that idea. I hope that when you testify before the appropriators, you tell them the same thing. With that, I'll yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to Iran and their nuclear program, without getting into the more classified discussion about what Israel might do on their own. If Israel were to act on their own and attack Iran, what implications would that have for our force protection in your region? And what should we be doing to try to, put ourselves in a position to protect against that?
I think it would increase risk to force of our forces in the region, but every day we're making assessments of our posture and our risk to force, and we make adjustments based on those. We're fielding new systems and new equipment and making adjustments every single day. We have a rule in Centcom: you improve your foxhole every single day, whether that's through rehearsals or any other actions that you're taking to better protect our forces.
And what are the systems that you think are working best if we were to, throw money at you and say, here's what you need right now that could best put you in a better position to protect your forces? What systems would you ask for?
So counter-UAS is the number one thing. We have a revolution in warfare. The character of warfare is changing with the drone revolution and unmanned systems. We see that in Ukraine. We saw that with the Houthis, and we see that even in Iraq and Syria. The number one challenge out there is detect. It's the ability to detect the counter-UAS systems and to defeat the swarms. And I think anything we can do in the air defense world, we went back to the FMS, we ought to ask ourselves the question, why does a THAAD missile cost 3 times as much as an Arrow that is jointly developed between the U.S. and Israel and the Missile Defense Agency? Why is an SM-3 Block 2B 6 times more expensive than an Arrow missile with roughly the same capabilities?
Yeah. In Syria, what's your, and I realize this is a huge diplomatic piece of this, but you are a diplomat as well as a warrior. Where can you give us an update on where you see the Syrian government? Obviously, it's crucial that government stabilize and block Iran and Russia from getting back in. What can we most do to help that, and where do you see it at right now?
I think what the president did was talking about lifting some of the sanctions. That's going to allow other countries to come in and bring some of the investments. That is one of the things that's desperately needed, is the investments back into the country. We're working directly right now with the Syrian Democratic Forces, our Kurdish partners and Arab partners on the ground going after ISIS, to get them to integrate in with the new Syrian government. Turkey has played a very positive role in that. That is a big piece for the stability in terms of that. I think they got to figure out how to run all of the administration of their country. They have a few people that are running the country right now. I'm very concerned with the stability, but I think the fact that we are at the table now having those discussions, the upside is great, the downside is very low to being at the table.
How important is our troop presence in Syria to helping facilitate that process and continue to keep ISIS at bay?
So our purpose for being in Syria is for the de-ISIS fight. We literally took a strike this morning on an external operations leader from Central Asia up in northwest Syria. We're still waiting for the full results of that. That's what our forces do inside of Syria. We've made some adjustments, some consolidation of bases based on the fall of Assad. Right now we're making an assessment going forward of what other bases. It's all conditions-based, that I'll make my recommendations to the Secretary of Defense and the President. But right now, the guidance to me has been given to right now make an assessment on if any other adjustments that we need to make in our posture.
General Langley, there's a lot of concerning aspects to Africa, but West Africa right now seems to be the most concerning. I mean, it seems that the most capable terrorist organization is, gaining influence in multiple countries and threatening others. We don't have much of a presence there. What would be your recommendation in terms of how we contain that threat that is growing out of West Africa?
Ranking Member, I would say, since we moved out of Niger, we had to reset our CT strategy. And that's further engagement, especially with the coastal West Africa countries who are building capabilities and capacity to deter. And a number of countries is working, but JNM, which is and AQIM, and also ISIS Sahel are really starting to get their footing and affect themselves across the Sahel, AES countries of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. I think that just collaboration with our partners in increasing institutional capacity for enduring solution against those aforementioned VEOs. To do that, it takes a whole of government approach. Not so much our whole of government, but their whole of government, and we need to invest in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes this gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Amade, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, generals, for your leadership and your service for our country. And as a former Army Reserve intelligence officer who served in the Middle East, it is incredible to see President Trump's bold vision and a Middle East defined by, quote, commerce, not chaos. Now, those words are now backed by decisive actions that nobody dreamed possible. Now, President Trump changed Syria's path overnight from endless bloodshed towards hope. And there's a lot of optimism right there, and I know Ambassador Tom Barrack and Presidential Envoy Barrack's doing an incredible job in Syria, hitting the ground running. I don't know, he has a lot of flights back and forth from Ankara to Damascus. But General Kurilla, I know there's so many questions about Syria's transition, and after coming off of a 50-year Assad rule and ISIS mostly defeated, and I know you helped with you just talked about it briefly, with the agreement between integrating the Syrian Kurdish forces with the government forces of Syria. How's that integration actually going?
I would tell you it's actually going well right now. There's some sticking points, but what's happening is you have the Syrian Kurds are talking directly to al-Shara and the Syrian government right now. Turkey has played a positive role in that as well, but I think that we're on a good path right now. And do you envision that integration could also include other minority militia like the Druze or the Christians or Alawites in Syria? It could. Right now, though, I mean, we're focused on our partner that we have right now up in the northeast, and that's the Kurds. Very good. And our counter-ISIS train and equip fund, which helped the Syrian Kurds destroy ISIS, could be wrapping up. Now, can or should the train and equip shift to include Syria's forces? I think that would have to be a wait and see. I think the fact that we're at the table right now having this discussion, and that will allow us to make an assessment of that if that would be a wise choice. And how concerned are you about the foreign fighters possibly being integrated within the Syrian armed forces? That is the reason we have to take a wait and see on this. And are they integrating them right now? So right now, I mean, if you remember, these are some of the people that brought Shara into power. They are integrated into some portions of the government, and this is something that we have to make an assessment on. Very good. Now, shifting toward Iraq, the same train and equip fund is also used in Iraq. But why are we subsidizing Iraq currently when it's withholding public salaries and military equipment from our Kurdish allies up north? They have challenges every now and then. We end up working through them. They end up getting the salaries. They end up getting the equipment. There is always small frictions that we have to work through, but they are getting what they need. Sure. And Iran's stronghold within Iraq, is that presence increasing even despite all of the setbacks that Iran has been facing the last few months? I think Iran is trying to double down on getting a grip inside of Iraq, but I think Iraq is a sovereign nation, and they don't want to be a vassal state of Iran. Of course, but although there's a lot of Iranian militias currently still operating Iraq, I know they're holding a hostage, Elizabeth Surkov, that we want released as well. But how do you envision us pulling Iraq from Iran's stronghold? It is a challenge because it's their next door neighbor. We partner at the military level with the Iraqi security forces to go after ISIS. They're doing actually a very good job in terms of going after ISIS. We killed the global number two ISIS, Abu Khadija, out in the Anbar with the assistance of the Iraqis. So I think from a military to military standpoint, they understand the need and why they want to have a relationship with the West. There are a lot of other reasons at the State Department level on why we want to have a relationship with Iraq. A stable Iraq helps with a stable Middle East. Thank you, General. And shifting to Africom, General Langley, I know you have a lot of positive things to say about Morocco, and I do as well, as they were the first country to recognize the United States independence, and it seems like their alliance is increasing with us. Do you ever envision moving the headquarters of Africom from Germany to an African partner country like Morocco?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And as I would look at it from the operational perspective, cost-benefit analysis, the benefit of moving to Morocco would not exceed the cost. The benefit operationally of us being able to operate from Stuttgart headquarters onto it does not benefit in amount. The cost of moving the headquarters would be a big dent to our budget. So I would say from a cost analysis perspective, I think we are advantageous where we are right now. When we look at the overall costs, we would not be benefiting from moving our headquarters onto the African continent at large. But let me just say, Morocco is a great partner, and what they do in exporting security is tremendous, especially in the sub-Saharan countries.
Very good. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
Matthew 20:16, so the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Representative Wilson and Courtney, if you need any tips on how to maximize your time, Rep. Amade and myself are experts in this particular committee. I want to thank you to the chair, to our ranking member, to our witnesses, as well as the service members I see behind you for your service as well. My district in the greater St. Louis region is home to the production of some of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, including many that Centcom has used in recent operations, such as intercepting incoming Iranian drones and missiles that targeted Israel and our regional allies. While I'm proud to represent a region that contributes so significantly to our national defense, I must also acknowledge that many of my constituents are still struggling to recover from the most devastating natural disaster to impact our state since the late 1950s. But as a region, we will recover, and we are committed to build and support our domestic industrial base that is crucial to our national security. But what is not crucial to our national security is turning our backs on our allies, like we've seen from the administration, and cutting essential foreign assistance programs that go hand in hand with our efforts to promote strong U.S. global leadership. China and Russia have made significant military and economic inroads across the African continent, posing serious implications for U.S. strategic interests. At the same time, the Trump administration, under the guise of pursuing efficiency, has slashed funding for global development and humanitarian programs. These cuts have, in practice, created greater inefficiencies and undermined U.S. influence abroad. General Langley, how does U.S. economic aid How does U.S. economic and humanitarian engagement on the continent contribute to advancing Africom's military objectives, particularly when it comes to countering the destabilizing influence of Russia and China?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And I'll just go back on the operations, especially the operations that we do in Somalia. So when we support the Somali National Army, as they've gone through numerous phases to the liberation phase of significant regions across Somalia, they get into phase 4. And some of the capabilities that outside of the kinetics and military operations, they were able to stabilize the region. So we're at a point now looking forward to what worked as far as aid in the past, but this is where the Secretary has charged me with engaging other countries of a shared burden. A shared burden of looking at contributing countries, not only troop contributing, but also in phase 4 operation, which is stabilization. So those discussions are taking place at a higher level, at the policy level, and engagement with other countries, so that we can focus, laser focus on countering terrorism and a shared burden with other countries to be able to take up that void. Over.
And since Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack against Israel, one notable development has been the strengthening of military and security partnerships between Israel and its Arab neighbors, especially evident during the 2 Iranian missile and drone attacks last year. This growing security cooperation has shown potential in laying the groundwork for peace. And to the ranking member's point, we endeavor to see a future for Palestine beyond Hamas. So, General Kurilla, from a security perspective, how can enhanced cooperation between Israeli and Palestinian security forces or broader regional security coordination help establish a foundation for long-term peace and stability?
Great question, Congressman. There has to be, Hamas cannot be in charge. There has to be an alternative to Hamas. I think that is some form of a Palestinian governance. I think the regional partners can work with Israel to figure out what that is and with the Palestinian people.
For almost 20 months, the Iranian-backed Houthis have wreaked havoc across the region, causing significant instability. The administration recently announced an agreement to cease all operations against the Houthis in exchange for a halt in their attacks on U.S. ships. I will submit my question, but I want to talk about how this agreement excludes our regional allies and the implications of that. But
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mismer.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. General Kurilla, I couldn't agree with you more that FMS reform is needed, and we just have to do better in that regard. In addition to reforming the FMS and DCS process, would you also agree with the need to reform or eliminate other non-treaty agreements that inhibit our ability to work with our allies and partners, such as the Missile Technology Control Regime?
Can you say the question again, please, Congressman?
Yes. How could, other than FMS and the DCS process, would you agree that we need to reform or eliminate other non-treaty agreements that inhibit our ability to work with our allies and partners, such as Missile Technology Control Regime?
I think we should find those partners in the region that we know can safeguard the technologies, and we should work with them. We have several in the region that have offered up to say they would like to help produce. That is where we need help, is the production line right now, and I think that's something we should strongly look at.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the professionalism of our forces who have conducted operations in the Red Sea, but I'm wondering what work needs to be done on the policy end with our regional allies and within our own interagency to devise a successful strategy against Yemen, both that deters their destabilizing military actions of the Houthis and coerce them into making their closure of the Red Sea politically untenable in the region.
Was that to me or to policy?
To you.
So I think well, I'll defer to policy first for any policy question, then I'll take that.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I would just highlight two things. First, with the conclusion of Operation Rough Rider, we are not certainly in a position where we are ending our entire engagement regarding the Houthi problem set. The Houthis are still under a foreign terrorist organization designation, and we're still pursuing a whole-of-government approach, which obviously includes other interagency elements to tackle this problem set. And then I would just highlight some of the comments that you made just a moment ago, which is the longer-term problem set for Yemen and the Houthis writ large really is something that in our relationships with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and our other Gulf partners, this is something where we'll look to burden share this effort and really develop a regional solution that empowers our Gulf partners that we've continued to develop a deeper defense partnership with to tackle the long-term elements of the problem set.
Thank you. General Kurilla, I also have concerns about the long-term stability and strategic implications of using high-end platforms and munitions like the B-2 bomber, Jasmine, and Tomahawk cruise missiles against supposedly unsophisticated adversaries like the Houthis. Has use of these platforms and the rapid proliferation of adversarial drones led to more consideration toward the effectiveness of directed energy technologies and counter these platforms?
Yeah, we absolutely need to be putting more work into directed energy, high-powered microwave. I think some of the innovations that have come out of this since Operation Rough Rider, about 40% of the drones shot down were shot down by something called Advanced Precision Weapon Kill System, a laser-guided 2.75-inch rocket fired off our F-16s or F-15s. That's a $25,000 munition going against a roughly $50,000 or $100,000 drone that is an Iranian-provided drone to the Houthis.
Okay. Excellent. So what role can our defense industrial base play in advancing directed energy solutions to ensure Centcom can maintain their technological advantage?
So I would compliment someone like General Randy George and his Army Transformation Initiative. He is sending things over once they reach a technology readiness level to a certain level. He sent over directed energy mobile short-range air defense. We brought it into the theater. We tested it in the harshest conditions you can find against an active enemy and a thinking enemy, and we provided feedback on its effectiveness to make it better so they can make a better informed decision on that. We have the same with high-powered microwave. We're doing things with software. Software is a weapon as well, and rapidly changing this. The character of warfare has changed with the drone revolution, and that's what we need to be paying attention to.
Okay, thank you. Also, how would you assess the performance of Israel's missile defense architecture during recent fighting, particularly systems like David's Sling and Arrow that we co-produced?
So I would tell you that the missile defense, out of the 300-plus missiles that were fired into Israel, one person was killed. a Palestinian from Gaza who is living in Jericho.
Okay, thank you. Has the attack highlighted any gaps in our budget requiring additional resources from Congress?
I think we need to figure out how we also produce, I go back to my comment, why does a THAAD cost 3 times as much as an arrow? Why does an SM3 Block 2B cost 6 times as much?
Yeah.
We've got to figure that out because we are on the wrong side of the cost curve.
Very good. Congress has appropriated...
Gentleman's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses and General Kurilla and General Langley. Thank you for your decades of uniformed service. I want to thank you, General Langley, for these great placemats. I mean, it's a fantastic graphic depiction of why Africa is so important to our national security now and into the future. And in particular, the things that I sort of honed in on is the fact that it's 11 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. 25% of the 193 countries in the General Assembly of the UN hold seats in Africa. And the rare earths is probably maybe even more interesting in how much China controls here. So in this context, in this sort of geopolitical context, when we look at all the elements of power, we have diplomatic, information, military, economic, and I know there are various iterations of this. Ms. Thompson, you emphasized the importance of countering China's influence in Africa. However, this week, the House is voting on a rescission package that cuts $3.7 billion in soft power. For example, hundreds of millions in cuts to PEPFAR, a program started by George W. Bush. Forgetting the more than 25 million lives saved by PEPFAR since the program started in 2003, there's no question that there has been that this has been an effective program in extending America's power and influence. This has made us safer and boosted our national security. And in the testimony that DOD sent over for today's briefing, it said, unfortunately, the CCP information manipulation is significantly outpacing our efforts to counter their campaigns. Unchecked, China's efforts could reshape the information landscape in Africa, creating biases and gaps that could lead African nations to make decisions to subordinate the economic and security interests to China's own. So my question is, given sort of the withdrawal that we've seen this administration take in the information environment and communicating through, Voice of America and other entities that are specifically focused on Africa, and in withdrawal of these critical soft power programs, are we more or less in a position to make sure that our military objectives are achieved?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I can't speak explicitly to the State Department equities in this, particularly the humanitarian aid that you speak about. However, I will say from a Title X DOD perspective, obviously the department has...
I'm sorry, let me stop you for a second. I'm talking about like sort of these elements of power, right? And there's a balance to these, right? So by withdrawing from the informational, from the economic elements, does that make achieving the military objectives more or less difficult?
Appreciate the question, sir. What I would say from a DOD perspective, thinking exclusively about the Title X assistance that we provide, particularly on the continent, that's part of our review process, is understanding how our
okay, let me pause you right there. General Langley, same question to you. Does this make achieving the military objectives more or less difficult?
Especially in the MISO. We just, as far as our information operations, countering some of the propaganda that the CCP is putting out there. Yes, that's where we need to be able to confront them, because we had a lot of success in the past, and even going forward, Secretary Hicks has given us the tools to press back on the CCP.
So thank you, General Langley. I heard yes, which I think is the short answer to the question, and I just
there are
want to
things
make sure
that we need to counter them going forward.
Switching gears to the Houthis, General Kurilla, over the last few months, we spent over $1 billion attacking the Houthis, and our campaign. Can you evaluate whether we've disrupted, neutralized, destroyed their capabilities?
So the President gave us a very specific mission which was to get the Houthis to quit shooting at American ships. 6 months ago, on 12 November 2024, was the last time a destroyer went through the Bab el-Mandeb. It was attacked 17 times with anti-ship ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles and UAVs. In the last week, we've put 4 destroyers back through the Bab el-Mandeb, and we were not shot at.
Okay, I got that. They're not attacking U.S. shipping. Are they still attacking Israel? Yes or no?
They are still attacking Israel, and we are still defending Israel with our THAAD system.
Thank you. So,
Gentlemen's times have expired. Mr. McGuire, you're now recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses and to all of our military folks here. We wouldn't have a country without you. Thank you. Ms. Thompson, we really appreciate what you're doing in this administration with Peace Through Strength. I think we all agree you have to have strong American leadership in the world or you have a lot of problems. How has the President's outreach to the new government in Syria encouraged a good outcome for our Kurdish partners in the Syrian Democratic Forces?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And I would highlight the President's speech in Riyadh, in particular, this idea that the Middle East region is transitioning from chaos to a region focused on commerce and empowerment. I think that this is an incredible good news story when it comes to the conversation around Syria. We are giving the Syrian government a chance, and stability, if it holds in Syria, will be monumental for the region. And it's something that the administration is really leaning forward on as a whole of government effort. Obviously, it's conditions-based, and we'll be very careful as we watch the developments, but it's a really positive, good news story that further underscores that the region is really transitioning from this region of chaos into a region focused on prosperity.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, since President Trump took office, have counterterrorism operations remained static, or has there been an increase in operations in Somalia that have removed a number of terrorists from the battlefield?
Thank you for the question. I will defer to General Langley on any additional operational comments, but I would say, yes, the Somalia elements that you highlight, the increase in precision targeting in Somalia to take out terrorists who specifically pose a threat to the U.S. homeland, demonstrating the capability and intent to carry out operations against the U.S. homeland, our forces and our people, is an incredible success as part of this administration's effort. Obviously, countering terrorism and protecting the homeland is one of our #1 national security objectives, and I think that the activities in Somalia since day one really do highlight the capabilities that we have, and so I would offer General Langley the opportunity for any operational comments.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Congressman, for the question. And I would say that, when the President gave me expanded authorities and through the Secretary of Defense, we've been pressurizing ISIS in the Golan Mountains considerably. That is reinstituting deterrence in a kinetic way. And they are yielding to it to the point that they are considering moving to seek refuge elsewhere. So that this is what the warrior ethos in the lethality that we've imposed in the Golan Mountains against a foe that has the capability of attacking our homeland. I think this movement to increase our lethal effects on them is causing there to establish a pause.
Thank you. General Kurilla, Iran and its proxies across Centcom continue to use drones to target critical infrastructure, military installations, and commercial shipping in the region. The conflict in Ukraine and Iran's attacks on Israel have highlighted the challenges posed by saturation attacks comprised of UAS and missile threats. And I'm concerned about the survivability of high-value air defense systems like Patriot, THAAD, against drones and drone swarms in the Middle East as tensions remain high. As the threat from proliferated small UAS technology grows in Centcom, to the extent you can share in an open setting, how is the Army thinking about requirements to defend deployed assets in theater against coordinated attacks from advanced aerial threats like drones and drone swarms?
So that's why you want to have a layered defense, Congressman, and we start everything from they can reach as far out, ballistic missile, all the way down to the Group 1 quadcopters. We have capabilities that we layer against all of that, whether it's electronic or kinetic, non-kinetic means as well. What the Army is doing to help us with that, as General George is doing his Army Transformation Initiative, sending forward capability not to replace but to augment, to put it in those harshest conditions in Centcom against an active thinking enemy, and we give him feedback on the effectiveness of those to make it better before they do large purchases of those equipment.
Perfect. All right, from your perspective, General Kurilla, and for integration, would it be better to baseline these requirements into existing weapon systems like Patriot or THAAD, or separate?
What we want to be able to do is have a layered defense, but we need all of those systems to talk to each other. We can't have one-off proprietary software systems that don't work with one overarching software system that controls all of them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for our witness for answering the questions, and I yield back.
Mr. Tran, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Langley, General Kurilla, thank you so much for your service. Ms. Thompson, welcome. General Langley, you rightfully stated that Africa is a nexus theater where global interests converge and the United States continues to face fierce competition from China and Russia across the continent. Chinese state-owned firms now hold stakes in 78 African ports, and China is currently negotiating a second PLA Navy base in Gabon. In your testimony, you mentioned that the U.S. approach to Africa is African partner-led, U.S. and ally-enabled. General Langley, in your view, which African partners are the most important to furthering U.S. interests on the continent and why?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And it's a broad question, but as far as China is concerned and their aspirations to become a global hegemon, I'll just give a statistic that's pretty compelling. They're outspending Africom militarily 100 to 1. So as they have basing aspirations across the globe, but especially in Africa, in those places, whether it's on the east side or the west side, they're trying to close the gap from a geostrategic positioning to be able to stop our joint forces for employing across the globe, or A2AD, in which aerial denial, anti-access. And then also their critical minerals, trying to control those supply chains. So those geostrategic ways of affecting their geopolitical means to engage with a number of countries. It's too many to state.
Sure, I appreciate that. And then, with U.S. engagement with certain African countries being either cooled or stalled entirely, General Langley, why is continued engagement with those African countries that are still engaged with the U.S. so essential for our national security?
Absolutely, because some of these countries we have shared interests in, and we see it as essential for the purposes of the shared commitment of stability and security across the region, not only for counterterrorism, but just for international rules-based order. A number of these countries see the importance of that, and that's why we have shared national security objectives, so they can get to the future of being able to stand on their own and be able to create prosperity in across the future. And a number of countries side with the United States in our ways to do it.
Thank you. General Langley, you mentioned in your opening that Morocco is an example of success from our investment. Was hard power the sole tool we deployed for that success? And generally, do you believe that hard power is the only tool we have to further U.S. interest in Africa?
It's a portfolio of a number of powers, whole government, building institutional capacity, having the African countries take a lead and share with one another as a whole has proven to be the success against a number of layered threats that are stalling progress across the African continent.
That's right, and we need to be thinking about all levers of power, including the soft power tools at our disposal when looking to counter Chinese influence, deter further adversarial military expansion, and to protect access to critical minerals on the continent. In fact, that is why I plan on voting against a rescission package on the House floor this week that rescinds bilateral and multilateral investment in places like Africa. General Kurilla, how is the U.S. military supporting the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza, and what obstacles have you observed that are preventing the seamless delivery of such aid?
So we have in the past, we've delivered humanitarian aid through both air, sea, and land. We are working with the Jordanians. We help screen the convoys that would then bring in the food for that. But right now, we are not actively working the humanitarian aid.
Is there a reason why we're not?
I mean, that right now, Israel has contracted an American company that is doing the distribution inside of Gaza. Hamas hates that because Hamas no longer has control over that distribution. So this is an American private company that Israel did. There was Centcom was not part of that contracted this, that is doing 1 million-ish meals, I think they're doing a day, a little more than that, through this private company.
And are we prepared to help if Israel was to ask for our assistance?
We are prepared if the President directs us to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your testimony here today.
Thank you.
Chairman, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurilla, I want to congratulate you on a fantastic career.
Well, thank you,
for
sir.
your service to the country. It's wonderful. I'd also like to acknowledge your Master Chief back there. Derek and I worked together for, well, you could probably tell for how long by the color of my beard and the amount of hair we both have on our head. So you did well by yourself there, General. General Langley, you're a Marine, right? And then the Marine hymn from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, right? Tripoli, that's Libya. And we went to war with them because the Barbary pirates were kidnapping our citizens. Thomas Jefferson did not want to do that, but he did. And other nations were paying tribute to these pirates, and we said enough, right? So I'd like to gently remind some of my colleagues that sit over there, if they actually did their homework and read the rescissions packages that are proposed by the Trump administration, we're removing what can really reasonably be titled 21st century tribute. So we're going to be assisting our African partners and our Middle East partners, but we're not paying tribute anymore. Those days are over. And you're in that uniform because we stopped paying tribute back then. So I can forward the package to anybody over there if you actually want to read it instead of just complaining. So former Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said he would take the Taliban at their word when they're talking about anti-terrorist operations, counter-terrorist operations, and human rights, in particular to rights of women in Afghanistan. General Kurilla, how's that work out for women in Afghanistan?
Not very well right now, sir.
Not very well. Okay, so the Houthis now have said that, okay, my bad, we're going to stop shooting missiles at ships. And I would encourage everybody to give as much validity to the Taliban statement as we did, or excuse me, to the Houthi statement as we did, or should have, to the Taliban. General Langley and General Kurilla, I've spoke to the Special Operations Component commanders about this, so I understand the issue with the Houthis is not a seam, between your two COCOMs. But can you, in this setting, can you tell me, do we know how the Houthis are being resupplied by Iran?
Vast majority of it is by sea. They put them on, they come out of the ports in Iran. They put them on dhows, stateless dhows. Some of them go on maritime vessels into Djibouti.
Yep.
On the UN vessel inspection mechanism, they put stuff inside a container. If you have a ship with 500 containers and it's in the bottom of it, you can put all those sensitive components in the bottom of that. Now, a positive thing that just happened in the last month is that the UN vessel inspection mechanism decided to go to 100% inspection of containers. I think it needs to be 100% unloading of all the containers to see what's inside of them. But that's a positive step, but probably about 80 to 85% goes by sea.
Okay. Why are we not sinking these vessels? So we have a terrorist nation, Iran, with their minions. They're sending lethal munitions to the minions, which have shut off the Red Sea for commercial traffic. Why aren't we sinking? I guess maybe that's a question.
Well, we have to find the ships. The hardest part is to find that ship.
Right.
At any given time, there's between 3,000 and 5,000 dhows on between the Iran and Bab el-Mandeb. That's the same distance from the tip of Florida to Boston that you're trying to find these dhows.
I lived in Djibouti for a long time, and I sent some of my guys to Yemen, and that was a big secret, and it's not anymore, obviously. But Ms. Thompson, have you guys looked at this from a policy perspective? I mean, the last 2 SEALs that were killed in combat, unfortunately, were in the Red Sea. Derek and I's teammates, and they were boarding these vessels to try to prevent these munitions from getting to the Houthis. So this is very personal to me. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you for the question, Congressman, and rightly understood. I can say more on some of the particular policy elements in closed session on this, but what I would say is one of the elements that we have looked at and continue to engage on is our European partners. They are actually very well equipped to continue to help us with this effort, particularly from their positioning in the region.
Ms. Thompson, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to because I have 20 seconds left. Right now, from a policy perspective from the DOD, if the United States of America understands, our European allies find a ship and we know for sure that there are munitions on there that are going to the Houthis, can we just sink it?
We can board it. We have the authority to board it, and if we find the munitions, we'll take the crew, we'll transfer that crew, and we can end up sinking the ship.
Very
we
well.
did one on a dial 2 weeks ago.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurilla, General Langley, thank you both for being here today, and thank you, ma'am, for being here today. And I want to echo my colleagues in thanking you for your distinguished service. I want to begin by talking about a trip that we took last month. We went to the Centcom area of responsibility, including Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE, with Ranking Member Smith and a bipartisan delegation from this committee. I have to say, General Kurilla, how impressed I was by the dedication and professionalism of the men and women serving in your AOR, especially given the rapidly shifting landscape in that part of the world. That dedication is incredibly important. The Middle East is a place that deserves American attention and investment, as I'm sure you would agree. General Kurilla, in your time as CENTCOM commander, you've seen the culmination of the civil war in Syria, the explosion of conflict in Gaza, a changing paradigm in Yemen, and much more. In my visit, I heard a sense of concern from our allies in the region. Amid the serious change, some of our partners in the Middle East worry that we're taking our eyes off the ball. General Kurilla, what are the tangible, concrete steps you think are necessary to reassure our allies that we are still focused on your AOR and that we still stand with them?
So I think words matter and actions matter. I think what we are doing is we are transitioning from a security guarantor to a security integrator. I think the thing, we have to have a sufficient and a sustainable posture. So we can't take everything. We have to have enough that we can still be able to partner with our partners in the region. We need to be able to give them the military equipment, the foreign military sales, so that I can be integrated into the region. We saw that on the defense of Israel, systems that can talk to each other, and this is one of the challenges with foreign military sales. They have real security needs. If we don't fill them, they're going to fill them. China shows up with an Amazon catalog. They say, pick anything in here. I'll give you financing, free shipping, prime shipping, and no end-user agreement. But I tell them it'll never touch our networks. So we've got to be able to provide them the tools that they need to integrate in the region, and then we become the security integrator.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We actually heard that from several times over there. We also need to be more responsive in being able to fulfill the deals that we do, so that people are not waiting, 10 years or whatever for the systems. Maybe we can work together with that. Anyway, next question. What we're seeing around the world is that allies are regarding the United States as an increasingly uncertain partner as we impose and then remove unilateral tariffs, consider cutting active duty and foreign assistance programs, and discuss using military force to take the territory of other nations like Greenland. I believe that we are made safer through our alliances and that making our alliances doubt our resolve makes us less strong. That is particularly true in Africa, where China has made long-term efforts through various initiatives. Meanwhile, the new administration muses publicly about terminating Africom. General Langley, can you describe in general terms the concerns you have heard from our African allies and security partners about this potential administration policy change and the impact it would have on our nation's security and economic resource requirements?
Congressman, I was in Nairobi last week, and I will just say the message from the Secretary of Defense by the chiefs of defense across Africa was well received. They get that they need to be able to provide their own security. They get that they do not need to be dependent on us anymore. There's things that they think that they can share in the burden, and they are ready to shift, such as countries like Morocco and Tunisia and Kenya. But there's others also in that as well. So they articulate what they need to push to that level. But at this point here, I think everything is positive, that they need to be able to take on their own security for Africa to prosper writ large.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your service. I yield back. Thanks.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, gentlemen, thank you for being here. I look at the flags behind you, and it means a lot to us. I look at the streamers on those flags, what they stand for, what they represent. I think about the service that you two gentlemen have provided to your country and the blood that you've shared and the friends that you've lost, brothers and sisters. that are represented in some of those streamers on those flags. The significance of a hearing like this cannot be overstated, really. We are in an era of adjustment for our nation, whereby we can move into the 21st century as a dominant military force worldwide in order to maintain and preserve or establish peace. And Congress has an incredibly significant job to do to listen to the experts that is provided to us so that we can improve the means by which we provide our warfighters with modern technology. So I thank you for being here and for your service. General Kurilla, you had mentioned multi-year funding versus 1 or 2 year funding. Would you please clarify for this committee the difference between multi-year funding for the DoD versus multi-year contracting for our defense contractors? Because we don't want to lock into a technology that could be replaced by a better, less expensive technology. Would you touch on that?
Sure, I agree. I mean, one of the challenges I think you have, if you're a business and you make X, you have this production line, but if you know you're only going to get money from these companies, you're spreading that out. You only have so much production line. So when we have partners come to us and say, we would like to purchase X, and we tell them they can get it in 2029 because we don't have the production capability, that is a concern. I'm also just as concerned that the industrial base cannot keep up with the weapon expenditure. Every conflict that we've had recently has underestimated the weapons. Russia, Ukraine, Israel. And so I think what we want to do...
Right, yes, sir. So not to interrupt you, but you're at the heart of the problem. What I want to get to here is that if we have to find the sweet spot, and I'm going to ask you what that is. We have a problem of historically like constant design changes with a program. We have to move away from that. If we have multi-year funding for the Department of Defense that gives greater executive authority to accomplish the mission, and build and procure and take delivery of the right vessels and craft. But we don't want to be locked into a multi-year contract with a particular defense contractor because that would insulate us against the emergence of significantly better tech that's more effective and more lethal and less expensive. We have to be able to make that shift. So what is that sweet spot?
I can't tell you exactly what the sweet spot is, but I do know we have to be agile. We've been making Patriot missiles for a very, very long time, so the multi-year funding on that, I don't know if it's 3 to 5 years, but if I'm a businessman, I'm not going to build new production lines.
Understood.
I don't know if I'm going to get money next year.
That's for like existing tech. Okay, shifting to some tech that's out there that I want to know if it's being shared. Some of our allies in the Middle East are incredibly wealthy. They have unlimited funding for research and development. And from my research indicates that they are fielding some autonomous tech that is far beyond what we have. Are they sharing that with us?
So we are partnered with several of these partners in the Middle East. We do share quite a bit. There are some things that we know that they are using as well, but we have quite a bit of visibility on that.
And finally, what would it take to wipe out Houthi operational capabilities, sir?
I think the number one thing that has to happen is to have Iran quit resupplying them. That they would die on the vine without Iranian support.
Die on the vine. We would like that. General Langley, General Kurilla, Ms. Thompson, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. And generals, thank you for your decades of service to this nation. It is greatly appreciated. I'm going to start where my colleague left off with the Houthis. even though we've negotiated the ceasefire with a designated terrorist organization, they continue to launch attacks, as we've said, both at our allies and continue to place global commerce at risk. What can you tell us in this open session about the specific drones attack on Israel, and what are we learning from that?
The specific what, ma'am?
Drone attacks on Israel.
From Iran or from the Houthis?
From the Houthis.
So for the Houthis, I mean, we are still shooting down Houthi UAVs that are going towards Israel. They have taken an Iranian UAV, it's called a Kazo-4, with some modifications, additional gas. They call it a Yafa. It has there's some Houthi firsts here, but it's Iranian equipment that can go 2,600 kilometers. And so when we have that, we've shot down dozens of them. And so they are taking a very simple UAV, extending the range of it, and then Israel has effective defenses as well.
It's been said, but I want to reiterate, we're in, between Ukraine and this region, hypersonic technology development, particularly with drones. What evidence do you have that the Houthis are sharing their drone warfare knowledge with our adversaries?
So with other adversaries, so I will take you back to July of 2024. We killed 7 individuals in Iraq that were setting up 2 UAVs. Of the 7 individuals killed, there was a Houthi UAV expert, a brigadier general. There was an Iranian IRGC UAV expert there. There was 3 Kataib Hezbollah individuals there as well, and there was a Lebanese Hezbollah individual there as well. So we are seeing that. There is Houthis have outreach to Russia. They have gone to China. They have cells in Iran. They're in Syria. They're in Lebanon as well.
Okay, thank you. Switching gears to General Langley, we've touched on in this hearing the very real nexus between our longstanding humanitarian efforts and investments in Africa to build allies, and at the same time the very real threat China poses, particularly to naval progress, but also the extraction of those rare earth minerals that are critical to national defense. All of that related to national security and your role. Over the last 6 years, the terrorist organization JNIM has seen dramatic growth in activities. You recently gave remarks emphasizing that the U.S. was focused on helping African nations build the self-reliance to fight such terrorists, but it was reported that the vast majority of programs run through the Global Fragility Act, a multi-year initiative intended to bolster stability in vulnerable West African countries, has been shut down by this administration. Can you please speak to the threat of JNIM to the region and its stability?
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. Yes, the epicenter of JNIM right now lies within the countries of Mali and Burkina Faso and to some degree Niger, but it's threatening of the former GFA recipient states. I've met in Cote d'Ivoire with Ambassador Davis Ba, and the thing in the past, they have been able to benefit of being able to share ways ahead for counterterrorism. So in their northern regions of the southern regions of Burkina Faso, but the northern regions of Cote d'Ivoire, they've been very effective with the construct they've established. So yeah, they benefited from their whole of government, and I think the GFA had been an enabler for that in the past. But going forward, they know that with the straight talk that we have already said that we need to share this burden. And Burkina Faso we've offered them other opportunities to be able to benefit with what Cote d'Ivoire has been successful at. So it's a sharing of ideas and sharing of the enduring solution to counterterrorism, which all of those countries can benefit from.
Thank you, General. And in my remaining moments, I'm just going to make a statement about the President's recent desire or statements and desire to develop the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East and how deeply troubling those statements are. Many of us share the desire for a lasting two-state solution driven by self-governance and long-term stability in the region. Yet building such a resort and displacing 2 million Palestinians will only exacerbate tensions and create a target for further hostilities in the region. I understand this isn't directly related to your responsibilities in the military, but I fail to see the national security reasoning. Instead, I want to echo with my last moments my colleague, Congressman Tran's excellent proposal that Centcom use its incredible logistics capabilities to support distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gooden.
Thank you. General Langley, I'll start with you and then move east. regarding the DRC and Rwanda. Could you give me kind of an update, not necessarily a history, but where you see things as they stand today with that conflict?
Yes, at the cusp of it, at the central piece of it, is the encroachment of M23 forces into the DRC, eastern DRC. They've been very successful in their offensive operations, going all the way down to South Kivu. This encapsulates some of the regions that are rich in critical minerals. Just at the diplomatic realm, I won't speak to that piece, but I know that Rwanda is allegedly supporting the M23. And then President Tshisekedi in DRC is trying to get his forces right set so they can counter this. So that's all in the diplomatic realm. SADC, a number of regional constructs in southern Africa are trying to solve this problem and trying to come to a truce where we can affect peace. Over.
Well, we would consider both countries to be friends of ours, I believe, so it's tricky in that sense. But in your mind, what needs to happen to wrap this conflict up and bring peace to the region?
From an operational perspective, like I said, this is mainly in the diplomatic realm, so I have to defer to State Department.
Fair enough. Thank you. General, could you, the last time you were here, I asked you about Qatar and our relationship with them. Some of my colleagues have questioned Qatar's reliability as a U.S. partner and their status as a major non-NATO ally. And in light of the President's recent visit, could you clarify the strategic benefits of continuing advanced military exports to Doha and our relationship with them? How's that going?
We have a phenomenal relationship, military to military, with Qatar. They house the largest base in the Middle East in Doha. They provide burden sharing in the form of $300 million a year to run those bases. They have been incredibly supportive of everything we do. Generally, the answer is yes. What is the question when I talk to them?
I find that to be the case as well. I share your belief toward that. How does what opportunities could you see for us to expand that relationship that would benefit our nation?
Sure. Just last week, we inducted for the first time a Patriot component into their depot-level maintenance, and they repaired that component for us. One of the things Qatar has offered to do is to help in either manufacturing or depot-level maintenance for some of the unique systems that we both share. So I think there's tremendous opportunity that can help also our industrial base as well as our maintenance base.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the work you're all doing, and good luck. Thanks so much. Yield back.